Hi, everybody. My name is Katy Halfin. I'm interdisciplinary artist, performer, educator, and the curator of this panel called The State of Things. This panel responds to the current situation that relates to coronavirus pandemic that affects us as artists and artist community on such a profound level. And I'm very excited today to introduce you to our cultural producers. Among them are artists, curators, educators, and they will share about their artistic and curatorial practices and talk about their art and reflect on the current situation today. They will talk about their personal experiences of coping with the crisis as artists, curators, and individuals working on different education and art related spheres. So before we go, I would like to add that if you have any questions, you can write us on chat and add your personal info, and we will respond to you during or after the panel is over. So I'm excited to introduce you first to our founder and the director of the Transborder Art Series, Graciela Castle, and the director, Monica Villa. Thank you so much for making this panel happen. I'm very excited, thank you. Please meet our panelists. So first panelist is Yasmeen Abdallah. She's an interdisciplinary artist, activist, and independent curator. We have next panelist is Tara Foley. She's an artist and longtime educator in a nonprofit art sector. We have Katy Hector. She's an artist, writer, and a curator. And we have our panelist, Kiyoko Sato. She is the director of Asian programming in White Box Harlem. So first, I'm excited to invite Yasmeen Abdallah and share about her art and artistic practice. And we will show first her video.
Thank you, Katy, and thank you, Graciela, and everyone. It's great to be here. I'm so honored to be part of this important discussion with all of these wonderful people. So basically, my practice is about community engagement and sustainability and thinking about the potential of objects, primarily in like one-use products. And my roles as an artist and an educator and a curator and an activist are all intertwined. It's a very symbiotic relationship, and all of the roles kind of feed each other. So my art practice heavily influences the education and the curricula that I teach, and I work from very small children, younger than pre-K, all the way up to college, postgraduate, continuing ed, and senior citizens. And we, think a lot about the idea of how to reuse what's in existence, and thinking about the histories of all of these elements. So I scavenge and collect different elements, such as tea, which I think is a great way to bring people together. It's a shared moment in a very busy lifestyle. And it gives us a moment to slow down and really check in with each other. And one of the things about COVID-19 is while we're not able to do that right now in a very physical sense, we can still sit down and communicate through all of this wonderful digital media, which I'm really thankful that we have today. And so this idea of connection when we're in isolation is a new challenge that I'm really trying to explore. And through my curatorial and activist practices, obviously it's much harder to do those things without the physical engagement component. So what I'm doing is a lot more of online platforms. I'm working on a project now where it's sort of a digital pen pal program where people can write about each other's work. They can share each other's artworks. And post their own stuff, and it's a way to engage around the globe. I'm thinking a lot about the media and how it's very self-serving in a lot of ways, and we're not hearing about other stories, and I feel like that's a really important issue that we need to be solving. So I want to bring it back to the streets and have people kind of engage through their own voices. And I think that that's a new way to kind of bring collectivity through this very tragic time. And so thinking about how to curate online platforms, or to think about the future when the cities start to open up again, how is that going to look? And how are those conversations going to go?
Okay, thank you so much, Yasmeen. That was great. Thank you so much for sharing about your practice. Our next panelist and artist is Tara Foley. She is a long-term educator in a non-profit art sector. So please meet her and see her artwork.
These images are part of a series called The Book of Habilis. And Habilis was sort of a pre-man that, I guess it was called Homo habilis, that I was interested in because of their relationship to tools. But so basically what these images are is they are bits of languages that I've come up with that create patterns. And I'm sort of sending messages to the future artificial intelligence. It sounds a bit confusing, but it's really just almost like child's play, sort of, you know, as children do, come up with their own languages and ways to describe the world. I also have this practice where I was living in LA and my relationship with space really changed. I came from, you know, San Francisco, which was a very much a walking culture. And I didn't even learn how to drive until I was much older. And so I was thinking about walking and space. And so I began to craft my own shoes as sort of like a contemplative way of thinking about walking and my relationship with space and how that had changed in LA. What else do I want to say?
I have a question for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned before, as I know about your practice a little more, that your practice of drawing is very much related to weaving and to like earlier kind of looms and machines that you was interested. Can you a little bit talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I think my relationship with craft has been very long-standing. I'm really fascinated in the humbleness also of the craft community. I think a lot of artists that employ craft in their sort of fine art practice or in their daily life or whatever they're making, I've just noticed that it's a culture that I feel really honored to be a part of, just based on basically, like I was saying, the humbleness of the community, and you know, just from my conversations from weavers and people that make different things, there's always this tension between like the high art world and sort of the craft community, which I'm really interested in. But I think one of the things that's really interesting is a lot of weavers that I've talked to are very proud of the fact that like the modern computer, you know, a lot of people could argue came from weaving patterns, which also is has a very female oriented tradition or beginning. So I think that there is a lot of pride there that's interesting to me. So I try and find ways to weave. Well, basically also these pages are supposed to one day become weavings, but that process is very difficult and going to take a long time.
Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you so much for sharing about your practice. That's really interesting to hear. Thank you. Our next panelist is Katy Hector. Katy Hector, she's an artist, curator, and writer. So we will go and see her video first right now.
I am an artist. I guess everything that's up on the slide right now is work that I've made in the past 3 weeks. I guess I want to speak directly to what my experience has been like over the last couple weeks, and especially COVID, being an artist in the city, being a curator and a writer as well, and just finding outlets for either my practice or curatorial vision or writing, or finding outlets for that. So I had a number of shows planned for April and for May, and kind of going into July as well, that immediately, you know, come mid-March, we all found out that it was more of like shelter in place and we had to stay inside. And so just immediately switching gears to thinking about other ways of communicating. I left the city and ended up in Delaware for a period of time and just was self-quarantining and doing all of that. And I focused on, luckily I was able to bring like a little studio with me, but I focused on making collages and just in a very cathartic way, still having a practice or a semblance of a practice, even if it's a pared down one, and being able to think about images and, you know, subconsciously just pair things together, which are, you know, making about 50 collages over the last couple weeks. And just as soon as I'm done putting them together and kind of tucking them away and using them as a journal. So not thinking too much about, you know, what's coming up in terms of imagery or colors or anything, but just preserving this moment and being able to reflect upon it later, which I think we all will kind of have to consider what this means for all of us on the other side. Like I started saying before, I had a number of shows coming up, which I was super excited about. And there are a lot of really wonderful artists that I was excited to have shows for, including Kathy. We were gonna collaborate on a performance event. And so, like I said, immediately knowing that this was going to be a very different world for the next couple weeks, and still really wanting to find ways of expressing and connecting with people. So decided to literally shift everything onto like an online platform. And instead of doing shows, being able to convert my Instagram page over to doing artist features, and still finding a way to communicate the essence of work, a whole range of multimedia work from paintings to performances, figuring out a way to still keep their potency and still translate new and different ways of looking at the work, but through an online feature, which is something very new. And I've been building websites and I've been learning, and you know, it's been this whole test of how to keep momentum and keep going and have something to look forward to. So I think out of those two things, that's kind of what's defined the last couple weeks for me. And I'm interested to hear what everyone's experience is like, either before or during, you know, the last couple weeks. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's really exciting to hear how everybody copes and responds to the situation. Then our next artist and panelist is Kiyoko Sato. Kiyoko Sato is the director of the White Box in Harlem, and she will also share with us her video of her curatorial practice. Please meet Kiyoko.
I'm an independent curator and also serving as the director of Asian programming at White Box Harlem. And I need to start from the White Box Harlem programming because coincidentally, we held a show about gaming, Trapped in Wuhan. We are showing. You know, he's from Wuhan. And he purchased a ticket to come to the opening, which is in February, but he couldn't make it to the opening because of the COVID-19. And we didn't know it's gonna come to New York City, but it was only in Wuhan right then. But you know, he couldn't make it, but our show was on. That's a timely, it's typical White Box exhibition, I would say. This is a part of Kemin. She switched to the original works to this one. He was not supposed to wear a mask, but he put a mask because of the pandemic. And as a mother of two girls, 10 and 13, and actually I need to share that my ex-husband stopped paying their child support. It's very, very unfortunate. but it's very difficult. But sometimes people can work more, can create more works because of difficulty. That is what I'm doing. And actually, I'm working tremendously, organizing 4 exhibitions right now. 4 is kind of a lot of work. First one was Firoz Mahmood. He's Bangladeshi, and I'm trying to materialize these exhibitions in White Box Harlem in September or next spring. It's gonna be a first solo show, and Firoz Mahmood will create new works for the show, inspired by the history of the migration of Bangladeshi citizens to the US. Mahmood was inspired by the book Bengali Harem, written by Vivek Board, a professor. Second one I'm organizing is a solo show of Zai Nomura, Japanese artist, a PhD also. Mahmood is PhD as well. And the Shapes of Soul, the video was in the water. And Zai Nomura lost his handicapped sister after the Great Hanshin earthquake in Japan, which took place in January 1995. The quake had a magnitude of 7.3 and killed more than 6,400 people. He created an artwork Soul Requiem device, which Katy showed, to print his sister's portrait on water inside the work. We are planning to set up the specific website so people can submit portraits of their family member lost to COVID-19. And we will use the portraits print on the water like Zai Nomura did for his sister to commemorate the people who lost their lives. The third one I'm organizing is Yuki Iwanabe, One Last Hug. Venue is going to be CRS, Center for Remembering Sharing in East Village. Actually, Director Chris is watching this session. Hi, Chris. Yuki Iwanabe is a photojournalist based in Fukushima. He was a staff photographer at the largest newspaper in Japan when the Great East Japan earthquake happened in 2011. But he left his elite and stable position and permanently moved to Fukushima from Tokyo. He wanted to continue documenting devastated area in north of Japan. He has been recording 3 fathers and family who lost their children by a tsunami after the earthquake. It's gonna be a sound art group show. 5 artists is gonna join, and the title is Viewpoint of Making, co-curated by Masa Hosojima. In this project, we will feature 5 Japanese sound artists. Kenichi Kanazawa and Takahiro Kawaguchi are from Japan. Ken Ikeda, who had just moved to Tokyo from London. Rie Nakajima, who is based in London, and Masa Hosojima, who is based in New York.
And now we will move on to the conversation and open conversation between artists. So all of you shared a little bit about your practice and how you're coping already. So let's talk and raise the questions that are happening to us now. Among them, we are facing losses and hardships, and what are you noticing? What are tendencies that happening in art community? What are you noticing, and how would you respond? How you respond to that?
I'm seeing everyone across the board encounter some type of problem or barrier. You know, life is not normal right now, so. But there's this kind of like lateral expanse. It's like we've come across this barrier, we're spreading out and kind of reaching out to other people and keeping those connections, and if anything, finding different ways of communicating in light of everything. We're just starting to kind of experiment with different ways of, how to stay connected or how to continue creating or how to reevaluate new ways of just communicating, even if it's like through panels like these or social media or, methods of communication that would have either been a luxury or a form of entertainment in the past are now actually critical tools of keeping in touch and, self-educating and staying engaged.
Thank you for sharing, Katy. Yes, totally, absolutely. I'm noticing we all are doing that on different levels. And what do you think? Are we able to prepare to this kind of situation as cultural producers or like as a country? Would it be possible to do something in advance? Because we are facing such a harsh situation right now with all the losses. What do you think about that?
Well, I had been working in the nonprofit art sector and I had just moved into the museum sector. And I think for me, it was pretty, well, I just also want to say, I think artists are hit really hard. I think that the economy built around artists is very tenuous. It's scary. People are scared. It's definitely concerning. And I think on a larger level, it was kind of sad actually to see like sort of what the value of museums and art nonprofits. I think, a lot of us weren't considered essential. We weren't given sort of any type of money from the government. I'm actually not sure right now the current situation, but I know the museum I was working for, we weren't deemed essential. So essentially we could actually close, as a museum, as an institution. And so I think there's these larger questions about the value of art and the value that art gives society and culture. And that's always been an essential question. So I'm not saying this as a negative. I think it's actually a positive to like really throttle these questions into the public realm, because we've had to ask for help now more than ever, for support now more than ever. And it's been nice to see that support coming in. I think that I can't speak for other artists, but I think that's been, as a positive, a beautiful thing to watch. But then there's the other side of it too, where you are seeing these like established arts organizations sort of like crumbling and coming down.
Actually, I was talking to Yasmeen Abdallah, and she is also feeling similar to that in terms of education. Yasmeen, would you like to share about that?
Sure. Several of my classes have been canceled indefinitely in the New York public schools and the community centers, and we basically had like a weekend. I think we got notified on like a Thursday, and by Monday we had to have a whole new curriculum for my remaining class to teach sculpture online, and it's pretty challenging. And my students are in New York and New Jersey, and we were hit pretty hard. And, I felt like I had a responsibility where I didn't want them going out and, putting themselves or other people at risk to do these projects. And the idea of critique online is different. And I'm not the most technologically savvy person. So to really have a weekend to figure out how to shift these very physical elements online is... it's a challenge, and we have to rise to it, and we have to go out and we have to be strong for them and, put on this happy face and try to radiate positivity and that there's an end in sight. And, it's hard to look at these faces and to check in with them and to see how much it's affecting people, and to not be able to do anything. That it's like the worst feeling in the world. But on the positive side, I get to really kind of bring my love of recycling in, and they get to kind of go through stuff, and they really have to kind of stretch like materiality and like the limitations and kind of just like smash it. And it can be a really interesting experimental and incubation phase. So I'm really proud of them, how they're rising to the challenge, and personally too, I'm having to really kind of rethink what is available, and I think artists are kind of equipped for these crises.
Yes, we are facing it not for the first time. Yeah. We're always working with these conditions, especially as a freelancers, for sure.
Totally. So we're always like cobbling together, jerry rigging things and using the MacGyver strategy to kind of make things work. So finally, we excel at something, and I'm hoping that the the establishment will kind of take notice of this going forward. And I think there is something to be said about the fact that people are stuck indoors and getting frustrated, because we're actually making people accountable and showing how inept the handling of this pandemic was. And, it being an election year, they're under pressure. I don't know if the stimulus bill would have happened in any other circumstance. So I think there is something to people feeling isolated and alone and scared. And I think in terms of an activist stance, like that is a rallying call to kind of really force them to have to, think about the proletariat and take into account the fact that we are all essential in one form or another.
What do you consider? I'm seeing Kyoko working a lot with artists from Asia and in China, and I think that's a very, very powerful. And I want to ask, what do you think should be done in order for us to start healing as the community and as individuals? I think what happens to us right now is very traumatizing on a very, very profound level, and how we could heal from this situation after the pandemic is over.
It's one thing is very interesting is that, for example, the Prime Minister of Germany was saying that art is the essential part of our life. So that's a key word. Art should be center to heal people's heart. That's the thinking, confirmed during this pandemic. So, in the US, not political people are not preserving the art world. So I want people to focus on art more than before, afterward. And then we can work on, especially the curators are curing this society. And that's what I'm doing through the exhibitions. And I want to continue. And probably artists too, making art is part of healing. So we can teach that part altogether.